It's 8:35. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Anne. Shall we go through today's front pages? They're all leading on sort of different things, but the Sunday Express reckons that good times are coming, which is nice and reassuring, isn't it? They're taking a look at what they call the Prime Minister's message of hope. The Sunday Times, meanwhile, has a warning for the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer. They say undecided voters could give Tories fresh hope. Onto the Sunday Telegraph, which carries a picture of the late former Pope Benedict, who died yesterday, aged 95. And it's a campaign against dry January in the Daily Star, because they reckon that we should keep drinking just to support pubs who are under an awful lot of pressure at the moment. Which is a good excuse if you need one. Time to go through the papers now. Joining us this morning, Spiked columnist Ella Whelan and former advisor to Michael Gove, Charlie Rowley. And there's Stephen at home. Oh, I thought you had Timmy the cat with you, but you don't at the moment. Right.
No, I haven't. No, he's having his breakfast as we speak, quite rightly so. Ella,
I must say,
start with the Times. Hey, go on. Anne.
No, I was just saying, you're sounding a lot better.
I think I'm on the mend. So which the bosses will be breathing a sigh of relief, because it means I'll probably be able to come into work tomorrow to do I'm doing 12 till 3.
Hey, you said it now.
And next week.
You've said it now.
I'm going to have to. I know. No lying for me tomorrow. Anyway, on to more important matters. In the Times, Ella, what's happening with Keir Starmer and his green credentials?
Yeah, well, this is a little opinion piece from Peter Mandelson. As Anne said in the roundup of the papers, pretty much a large section of the Times is dedicated to looking at what Labour has to do and what it shouldn't do in order to get an election victory. And Peter Mandelson is arguing, he's basically saying that Labour should be cautious about launching any big policies. He uses the term, exciting versus reform. Says there should be some kind of compromise between the two, and says that when a party has a significant lead in the polls, of which Labour has had recently, that the temptation is, and he mentions the Blair years, the temptation is to go big and listen to party activists who want you to launch some kind of big scheme. And he references, Keir Starmer becoming the new Greta Thunberg. And he says rather than doing that, what Labour should do is to focus on painstakingly rebuilding Britain's economic strength. How you do that without big policy, I don't know. And looking at things like the NHS backlog, which again to me is something that is quite big policy. It's not small fry. But the reason I picked it out is because I was listening to one of your interviews earlier on about the strikes, and Mandelson as well, preaches caution in that area. He says that in return for higher pay, unions should accept reforms that will enhance productivity and change working practices. I just feel like I have to point out that to translate that for people out of kind of politico speak, what that basically means is that you get higher wages if you accept that a significant number of your workforce is going to be let go, which is what basically those reforms entail. And there is a quite reasonable reason why unions are going to be standing against redundancies. So, a bit of a kind of roundup from Mandelson, but basically a lot of the messaging in the Times is saying to Keir Starmer, you haven't got this in the bag, don't be complacent, there is still a lot of work to do. I can't say any of it sounds too exciting.
No, but I mean, he was seen as the sort of mastermind of New Labour. Has he come up with any ideas that Keir Starmer could run with?
Well, the one thing that he praises West Streeting, and he says that the kind of discussion that's being had about the NHS and changes to the NHS, not just funding, but also the suggestion that you would have non-graduate pathways through or apprenticeships through to get the basically staff levels up quicker. I mean, I don't think many people could argue with that. It doesn't really blow me away. But certainly something like that would be a sensible policy that a party could pick up.
And it would be huge.
It's hard work for the Tories, that though, Charlie, isn't it? Because basically what Peter Mandelson is saying is stick to the centre ground. Well, it is the centre ground that wins elections.
That's absolutely right. You can't just win an election just by pandering to your own base. But I think, look, we've all seen the tumultuous year that 2022 was with politics in this country. A week is a very long time in politics, but Rishi certainly has a year, possibly a year and 2 years to go. The last time that I think a general election could be called, or the latest time, could be as late as January 2025. So I think many people predict it could come before then. So Labour will have to come forward with policies themselves. I think Peter Mendelssohn's probably right that you don't want to go too far to then isolate people in the centre who, as you rightly say, Stephen, are the ones that are going to win you elections. But they need to come up with plans how they're going to deal with cost of living crisis, deal with migration, deal with the NHS, and tackle crime. All things that people really care about, and things that actually are going to be what people really vote on, the issues that people vote about when it comes to general elections.
Meanwhile, you've been looking at the Sunday Telegraph and the state of the police force at the moment.
I have, and talking about confidence in government and talk about confidence in politics, this is all about confidence in the police force. And the headline, you're absolutely right, police who sexually harass women escape with a slap on the wrist. Now, this will come as at a time for women in particular who, particularly following the case of Sarah Everard in Clapham, who was obviously totally murdered by a serving police officer. So the Telegraph have taken the Telegraph can reveal in an exclusive investigation, is what I'm trying to say, that at least 921 officers have been investigated because of their lack of conduct, and where they should have faced dismissal, they have just been let off lightly.
Why?
And as I say, well, it's not just the Metropolitan Police. This is widespread across the country, and this is what would be really shocking. And I think it is just about the behaviour that we see within the police service, where police chiefs have traditionally turned a blind eye to reports that have come forward or complaints that have come forward, because nobody wants to sort of rock the apple cart, I think is the phrase. So and it's only been through cases like Sarah Everard where there has been a real focus in the police service, and Sir Mark Rowley, of no relation to me, has obviously made a huge undertaking, particularly within the Met, to root out those serving officers who shouldn't be in the police force. And I think this is another investigation that will just back up what other police forces across the country need to do to restore confidence, particularly amongst women and girls, in the police forces that we have right across the country.
Quite shocking, actually, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is and it isn't. I mean, I think probably most people know that the police force have some serious problems, whether it's to do with the attitudes towards race relations or women. But it's sort of ironic or funny, I don't really know what the word is, maybe depressing, that the police spend so much time of late on social media or stood outside supermarkets with big sort of advertising posters saying, "We'll lock you up if you're offensive." Meanwhile, among their own officers, they are, their behaviour is to be wanting.
But if these particular officers have been investigated, they've been found, as you said, in any other situation, they would have probably got the sack. So they've been found guilty of at least bad behaviour. It's terribly depressing that nothing was done, just a slap on the wrist. That's not going to achieve any sort of change, is it?
Totally right, Dan, and it goes far beyond just comments that might be had in the locker rooms or things. These are police officers that have been found sharing images and exchanging racist conversations, and so these are things that you should not expect. It should certainly not happen, but you certainly wouldn't expect it in any public service, but least of all the police and the people that are at the front line to keep us all safe.
No. Let's talk eco-virtue signalling in the Telegraph. Ella, it's an interesting one, isn't it? The idea that, and it's not a bad idea, planting more trees and things, but if you don't do it properly, it's just a waste of money.
Well, this is the thing. So it's, the government has a pledge to hit a target of 30,000 hectares of new woodland annually. The councils are told constantly that they have to plant X number of trees, and it's all within the narrative of being eco-friendly, of combating climate change and blah, blah, blah. But the reality is that, particularly in councils, the desire to just get trees in the ground means that they're, one, not planted at the right time of the year, two, that, all the finer details of what you need to do to make a policy work, they're not watered enough, they're left to die. And basically there is a huge amount of wastage, that there's, spending £11 million on these kind of schemes, and in the high percentage, sort of like this, 80 local authorities are failing to record how many trees survive. High percentages of them are dying. And, anecdotally, I mean, I'm in Hackney, where actually there are some really nice trees. It's one of the best London boroughs for trees. But in every area where there is a low traffic neighbourhood, which is the system that blocks roads to pedestrianise them as a means of combating pollution, there are always trees in boxes, and they are always really ugly and stone dead. So it's just a kind of a reminder that so much of this is this kind of the desire to combat climate change ends up being greenwashing. It ends up being actually incredibly wasteful. And I've got a real bugbear about this. My husband's a tree surgeon, so he's obsessed with this kind of stuff. And there is a real problem with the government simply just throwing trees in the ground, them not being in the right place, them not being disruptive to the natural habitat and all that kind of thing, and also just land wastage. There's actually a huge amount of trees that are planted in land that could be used for, there's arable land that could be used for farming and things like that. So it's a warning against the kind of green-tinted New Year that doesn't do the job it's meant to do.
Or box ticking just for the sake of it. I mean, that's crazy, because somebody in every council must have been responsible for saying, right, I'm doing that, I'll find a place to plant these trees and all the rest of it, and not thinking beyond that.
But also, one of the biggest problems as well is watering, which is that if you live and somewhere and a tree has been planted on your street, go out and throw a bucket of water on it, because you don't think trees need watering. You don't think trees need watering, but they do as much as the plants in the box on your windowsill.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Especially to begin with. Take a lot to go.
Yes,
Talking about
exactly.
keeping watered, Charlie, I take it you're not doing dry January?
No, I think it's always important to support your local, and I think when it's a strange concept. I think dry January anyway, because it's still quite cold, it's still wet outside. We've just had celebrations of the New Year, and it can be actually quite a depressing month. So the idea that you can't get through it without, and you abstain from having a little tipple every now and again, I think is a terrible idea actually. So I will always go and support the
Not the
pub.
month to do it, really, somehow, is it?
Exactly. It could be a dry February might work because there are less days, so people might be more successful. But it's an interesting campaign because it's the front page of the Star that says, yep, it's the 1st of January, and it's a pledge for people to sign to go and support their local pub. Because we always hear about pubs, even throughout the year. I think it's about however many pubs close per week. And people are, with the cost of living, there's a serious element to it. With the cost of living, people are, and on the back of COVID, people are drinking at home, and they're going to the supermarkets and they're buying cheaper alcohol, they're consuming at home, and people aren't going out to support their local pub. So I think it's a brilliant initiative. I think it's something I can certainly get behind.
Do pubs do enough, though, to actually... I mean, it doesn't have to be about alcohol, does it? Or does it? Can't you go to the pub and, I don't know, I always think, why couldn't there be a really good juice bar in a pub or something like that?
Well, last time...
A juice bar?
Yeah, one of those...
I don't think that would go down
bars.
very well. Last time I was doing the papers here before Christmas, we covered a story about a local nudist club that was being banned from its local
yes.
pub. So maybe a few more, extracurricular activities in pubs like that might help get the locals in.
Well, don't forget, of course, you can get your alcohol-free stuff. If you don't want to actually drink but still want a beer, you can get your alcohol-free. Because I don't drink, but I do go to the pub and have alcohol-free beers and things, and it's great. I mean, because you get in the atmosphere. I was down a little local called the Shoulder of Mutton the other night, and it was fantastic. They were all in there playing darts and having a nice time, and the fire was on, and what's not to love? It was really, really good.
Well, and the non-alcoholic alternatives now are said to be much, much better than they used to be.
Great.
I know there's a very
Guinness is
good non-alcohol.
fantastic.
There's a very good non-alcohol gin, quite a few of them actually now, which are becoming quite famous. And you were tempting me with a non-alcoholic wine, which I must say I haven't tried yet.
Yes.
My kids had non-alcohol beers in the fridge this Christmas.
For Christmas,
And they're not still in the fridge; they were drunk.
Yeah, I got a bottle of it's supposedly meant to be like whiskey, American malt, I think it's called. I haven't tried it yet. I got that for Christmas, so I'm looking forward to trying that. If it's a little bit whiskey-like, I'll be very happy.
Meanwhile, this is the controversial one. Do you put fruit in a trifle?
Yes. Absolutely.
Fruit in a tripe.
On top, in the middle, all over the
All
place.
fruit, yeah. And what about you, Charlie? Fruit in a tripe?
Absolutely not. No. More room for the sherry. More room for the cream and the custard. That's beautiful. That's a beautiful combination. I don't even have fruit in my Pims. I can't stand fruit in
I
Pims.
love
Just
fruit in
Pims and lemonade. That's all you need.
This has turned out to be a remarkably controversial subject.
Yes.
What you put in your
Charlie,
tripe?
and you, I'd agree with you, Charlie. Good man.
Okay. Thanks very much. Anyway, thank you very much. We'll see you again.